Welcome, weary traveler. The fire is low, and the shadows are growing long. In the quiet space between waking and dreaming, a story is waiting to be told. So close your eyes, take a slow breath, and listen. Let us take you somewhere else for a while.
The stone of her small cell was cold, a deep and ancient cold that had settled into the very bones of the mountain upon which the keep of Grianan was built, a cold that no summer sun could ever truly banish. Lyra did not mind it. The chill was a familiar friend, a constant presence that reminded her of the stillness she now carried within her own heart. She sat not on her simple cot of straw and wool, but on the floor, her back straight against the wall, her eyes closed. She was not sleeping, not truly. Sleep was a thing for others, a state of noisy, cluttered dreams. Her rest was different. It was a descent, a sinking into a quiet, silver-lit landscape that existed somewhere between her soul and the one she had bound to it.
Tonight, the landscape hummed. It was the spirit of the Bruxa, the creature of moonlight and blood she had taken into herself weeks ago, that stirred within their shared space. It was not a violent stirring, but a gentle, insistent pull, like the tide nudging against the shore. It wanted the night. It wanted the air. Lyra's eyes opened, and the darkness of her cell was no darkness at all. She could see the precise pattern of the mortar between the stones, the single, perfect strand of a spider's web spun in the highest corner, its tiny architect waiting patiently at its center. Her hearing, too, was a vast and intricate thing. She could hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of her sisters in their cells down the long, curved corridor. She could hear the slow beat of a mouse's heart hidden deep within the wall's cavity. And far, far below, beyond the stone and earth, she could hear the whisper of the wind as it wound its way through the pines of the valley. Slowly, gracefully, she rose to her feet. Her movements made no sound. The ritual, the cursed shard of obsidian pressed to her heart, the whispered incantations in a language older than men, had taken more than her fear of the dark. It had taken her clumsiness, her hurry. It had replaced them with a liquid grace, the poise of a predator that never wastes a single motion. She wore simple homespun, a tunic and leggings of undyed wool, but they felt strange against her skin, coarse and foreign. She longed for the feel of nothing but the night air. The heavy oak door of her cell was not barred. There were no locks in Grianan, for there was nothing to steal, and no one to keep in or out. The only true prison was the one each sister carried within her own soul. Lyra placed her palm flat against the wood. She could feel the life in it, the memory of its centuries as a tree, the slow, patient pulse of the forest it had come from. With a soft push, the door swung inward on silent, well-oiled hinges. The corridor was a river of moonlight, flowing from a high, narrow window at its far end. The air was cool and smelled of stone dust, dried herbs, and the faint, metallic tang that always clung to the sisterhood. As she walked, another door opened, and Sister Elara emerged. Elara had bound to herself the spirit of a great forest cat, a sylvestrin. She moved with a low, coiled power, and her eyes, even in the dim light, seemed to hold the phosphorescent glow of a feline's. They did not speak. Words were rare in Grianan,
clumsy tools for expressing the vast, silent communion they now experienced. They simply inclined their heads to one another, a shared acknowledgement of the night's call, and then Ilara padded away in the opposite direction, towards the eastern battlements, where she liked to watch the movements of the deer in the meadows below. Lyra continued her own journey, down the winding stairwell that spiraled through the heart of the keep. Each step was deliberate, her bare feet making no sound on the worn stone. She passed the great hall, empty and cavernous, the long wooden tables like sleeping beasts in the gloom. She passed the alchemical labs, where the renegade mages who had founded their order had first dared to dream their dangerous dream. The air there was still thick with the ghosts of strange ingredients, the sharp scent of hellebore, the cloying sweetness of belladonna, and the deep, earthy smell of blood. It was a place of pain and transformation, the crucible where their humanity was burned away to make room for something else. Lyra felt no sadness for what she had lost, only a strange, quiet wonder at what she had become. Finally, she reached the small postern gate at the base of the keep. The heavy iron bolt slid back under her hand with a well-oiled whisper. She pushed the door open and stepped out of the world of stone and into the world of living things. The forest welcomed her. It was not the frightening, shadow-filled place of human stories. To her new senses, it was a vibrant, thrumming tapestry of life. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves was as rich and complex as a feast. The cool night air felt like a silken cloak against her skin. She could see every leaf on every branch, traced in the moon's silver light. The hoot of an owl was not a single sound, but a whole story of territory and challenge. The Bruxus spirit within her settled, content. This was its home. This was its truth. Lyra began to walk, not with any destination in mind, but simply following the pull of instinct. She moved through the dense undergrowth without snapping a twig, her feet finding purchase on soft moss and smooth stones, as if she had walked this path 1,000 times. She was no longer Lyra, the frightened orphan girl brought to the mages. She was part of this night, another shadow among the shadows, another hunter in a world of hunters and hunted. A low thrumming started in her chest, a resonance that was both hers and not hers. It was a form of hunger, but not for food. It was a hunger for sensation, for proximity to life. She followed the feeling, letting it guide her deeper into the woods. She passed a clearing where a family of wild boar slept in a heap, their snores like the rumbling of distant thunder. She felt no desire to harm them, only a detached curiosity. She could feel the warmth of their bodies, the steady, slow beat of their hearts. They were part of the night's symphony, and she was merely an observer. The pull led her onward, toward the sound of running water. Soon, she emerged from the trees onto the bank of a dark, swift-moving stream. The water tumbled over smooth, black rocks, its surface shattered with 1,000 points of reflected moonlight. It was here the thrumming in her chest grew strongest. She knelt at the water's edge, her fingers tracing the patterns in the wet moss that grew on the bank. She leaned forward and looked at her reflection. The face that looked back was hers, the same pale skin, the same dark hair, the same wide eyes, but it was different now.
There was a stillness in her expression that had not been there before, a profound and unnerving calm. And as she watched, a trick of the light, or perhaps something more, caused a second image to ghost over her own. It was faint, ethereal, the barest suggestion of another face, sharper, more angular, with eyes that held a terrible, ancient wisdom, and a mouth curved in a faint, predatory smile. It was the face of the Bruxa, her silent partner. Lyra felt no fear. She reached out and dipped her fingers into the cold, rushing water. The shock of it was exquisite, a sharp, clean sensation that seemed to wash through her entire being. The two reflections, hers and the spirit's, rippled and broke apart, then slowly reformed as the water stilled in a small eddy by the bank. They were separate, yet one. She understood, in that moment, what the founding mages had never truly grasped. They had seen this symbiosis as a tool, a weapon to be controlled. But it was not control. It was a merging, a becoming. She was not a woman hosting a monster. She and the Bruxa were becoming a new thing, something for which there was no name. She thought, for a fleeting moment, of the world beyond this valley, the world of men, of cities and kings, the world where the first of the new monster slayers, the men who drank the mutagens and called themselves witchers, were beginning to walk the earth. The mages had spoken of them with a mix of fear and contempt, calling their methods crude, a butcher's art. The Sisters of Grianan knew they were a threat, not because of their swords or their signs, but because they would never understand. They would see only an abomination to be cleansed, a corruption to be purged. The thought brought not anger or fear, but a deep and profound melancholy, a sadness for a future that would never be, for a path that would be erased from history. But that was a thought for another time. That was a thought for the world of daylight. Tonight, there was only the forest, the moon, and the cold, clear water. Lyra stayed by the stream for a long time, simply feeling. She felt the vibrations of the water flowing through the stone beneath her. She felt the slow, patient growth of the trees around her. She felt the tiny, frantic heartbeat of a shrew scurrying through the undergrowth nearby. It was all a part of her, and she was a part of it all. The predatory hunger inside her was sated, not by a kill, but by this deep, silent communion. As the moon began its long, slow descent towards the western peaks, and the first, faintest hint of gray began to touch the eastern sky, a new feeling arose within her. It was a sense of completion, a desire for stillness and rest. The night's wandering was over. She rose and turned back towards the keep, a distant silhouette of black stone against the paling sky. Her return journey was as silent as her departure. The forest seemed to bid her a quiet farewell, the leaves whispering as she passed. She entered the postern gate, sliding the bolt home with a soft click that echoed in the immense silence of the keep. She climbed the spiraling stairs, her body feeling light and satisfied. Back in her own corridor, she saw that Sister Alara's door was also closed. The forest cat, too, had finished its nocturnal prowling. Lyra entered her cell and gently pushed the door shut, enclosing herself once more in the cool, familiar darkness. She did not lie on her cot, but returned to her spot on the floor, sinking down with her back against the cold stone. She closed her eyes, but the world did not vanish. She could still feel the keep around her, a great stone shell. She could feel the sleeping forest outside. She could feel the quiet, rhythmic presence of the Bruxa spirit within her, no longer pulling, but resting, coiled and content. Her breathing deepened, slowing, until it was almost imperceptible. She was not falling asleep. She was sinking into the deep, quiet well of their shared consciousness, a place without dreams or fear, a place of perfect, unending stillness. The last thing she was aware of was the feeling of the cold stone at her back, a solid and comforting anchor in the vast, silent ocean of the night.